changed America forever.
A massive car bomb exploded outside of a large federal building in downtown Oklahoma City.
It was an act of cowardice, and it was evil.
Today, November 4th, 2019, is day one of 168 days leading up to the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19th, 2020. One day for each life lost. SiriusXM POTUS presents this special broadcast, remembering those who were killed, those who survived, and the lessons learned, and offering comfort, strength, and hope.
10 seconds.
Now, live from the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum, here's Michael Smerconish.
So welcome back to the Oklahoma City National Memorial Museum. Retired Chief Justice Stephen Taylor from the Oklahoma Supreme Court, now my guest. He is the current Memorial Foundation chair, was the judge for the state trial of Terry Nichols. Justice, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
I'm happy to be here, but more happy that you came to Oklahoma City.
Well, I'm embarrassed, Justice, that it took me 25 years because I'd heard so much about it. I've been to Zero and now the memorial created there, to Shanksville and to others. It's hard for me to describe what exists out the window behind which you are seated. Help me do that and paint this picture.
Well, I refer to this as sacred ground. That's the way when I describe this place, it's sacred ground. It is a time that Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols intended to strike the federal government. They hated the government, and they came to Oklahoma City because I think it was a place that it might be unexpected would happen, and their intention was to bring this city down and to attack the government. And the city responded, and there's been a renaissance in this city, and the lives of those who were lost. That's been our way to make their lives important, and that is that we have built the city and made this city and state stronger from this terrible event. This sacred ground, the 168 chairs, the reflecting pool, it's a place. There are people here on these grounds every hour of the day, practically, all day long into the evening. The museum continues. We work hard to continue to make the museum and the message relevant.
25 years ago, you were a state trial judge.
Yes.
Let's differentiate the federal trial process from the state process, and please explain your role to my audience.
Well, I was the chief judge of the 18th Judicial District, which is in southeastern Oklahoma, 2 hours away from here. All of the state trial judges here in Oklahoma County and the surrounding counties obviously were affected in some way, friends, family, whatever. They all recused from the state trial. And the Supreme Court of Oklahoma selected me, appointed me, assigned me 2 hours away to take charge of being the trial judge in the case. The state trial, there were 168 people killed, 8 federal officers. The United States the federal courts had jurisdiction over those 8 federal officers' deaths. There were 160 civilians killed, and the state of Oklahoma had jurisdiction over 160 deaths. And so the trial in my court is 160, actually 161, because we had a late-term pregnant woman who was killed. 161 counts of first-degree murder in my court.
Against Nichols.
Against Nichols. That was tried. I moved the trial to McAlester, Oklahoma, my hometown, my home district, in hopes that we would have a better shot at selecting a fair jury, because I think selecting a fair jury here in Oklahoma County would have been probably impossible. The conventional wisdom was we were going to have a difficult time even in McAlester.
I read an interview with you where you said you went home the first night of jury selection not thinking you could get it done.
This trial consumed a year of my life, leading all the motions and everything leading up to the trial and then the 4-month trial. And that night, the first night of jury selection, was the lowest night for me in the entire. There were a lot of frustrations, a lot of stress on me, but that night was the worst because we began jury selection. I had summoned 1,000 jurors. Normally for a first-degree murder case, I would summon 100, 150 potential jurors. I summoned 1,000. It was unprecedented in southeastern Oklahoma, or even in Oklahoma. And we began the jury selection process that first day, and it was one after another. They had heard about this. They were affected by this. They had already made up their minds, etc. And I went home that night and I thought, well, I'm going to give this my best try, but I was very pessimistic. But it developed, and we spent nearly 3 weeks, and we did get a fair jury. I am convinced of that. I had assured the defense counsel and the defendant, and I was certain of this, that there would be a fair trial or no trial at all. I promised them that.
A bit ironic, by the way, that these two guys wanted to bring down the government, and then you worked overtime to afford one of them a maximum level of right under the Constitution to protect himself.
That was the whole point, and that was my mission. My mission was not any particular outcome of this trial. My mission was to show the country and everybody watching that the justice system in Oklahoma worked, and that there would be a fair trial.
Take me in the courtroom and size up Terry Nichols.
He, one way to describe it would be that if you were casting a movie and you called over to Central Casting and said, send me a high school math teacher.
Really?
A very intelligent person, mild-mannered, quiet. He was the logistical leader in this. He handled all of the, how are we going to get the jet fuel, where are we going to get the jet fuel, where are we going to get the det cord, where are we going to get the C4, where are we going to get the fertilizer, how are we going to assemble all of this stuff and get it all put together. He was the logistical supply person in this. McVeigh was the macho guy who wanted to light the fuse. Nichols was the planner, the logistic person. And he's an intelligent man. It's very sad that his intelligence was devoted in such an evil way, but quiet, mild-mannered, intelligent.
You oversaw the sentencing phase. He was convicted.
Yes. In
your courtroom. Then you oversaw the sentencing phase. Were you surprised that life in prison was the sentence?
Not really. The same result in the federal trial. He got life. I guess the simple way to put it is he wasn't the trigger man. He didn't light the fuse. He was in Harrington, Kansas on the day the bombing went off. Obviously, he had planned and involved in planning all of this, but he didn't pull the trigger. I talked to several of the jurors after the trial was over, and this is a comment on the death penalty, and that is, after everything was over, I talked to all the jurors privately, one-on-one, just to get to know, just to find out what their thinking was. And of the 12 jurors, 7 were in favor of the death penalty, 5 were in favor of life without parole. The 5 who were in favor of life without parole, and I was told this by ones on both sides, the 5 who were in favor of life without parole were arguing vigorously in the jury room that life without parole is a harsher sentence than the death penalty. Nichols at the time was a healthy 49-year-old guy, and their position was life without parole is harsher than.
They didn't want to cut him a break. If anything, they wanted to torture him a bit more.
They considered it to be harsher.
He's alive today, right? At
Yes.
the Supermax
He's
facility in Colorado?
In Florence, Colorado at Supermax.
So the chronology here was that McVeigh and Nichols each had a federal trial. McVeigh was convicted, sentenced to death by lethal injection.
Right.
And then Nichols, having been tried for the federal officers whom he killed, then was tried in your court for the state crimes.
Right.
And am I right, Justice, that the law was then changed? You and I are looking at all of these chairs. They were all federal employees, and now he could have been charged. God forbid it would repeat itself. There wouldn't be a differentiation between those who were in law enforcement versus those who worked for the federal government. In other words, in the eyes of the law, a HUD employee or Social Security Administration would be regarded the same.
That's correct. At the time, it was the officers.
Right.
And now several of the 168 were civilians, truly civilians, the people who were in the Social Security office to take care of their Social Security, people who were in the credit union to do this or that, and then of course 19 children in the America's Kids daycare.
I went down a rabbit hole 20 years ago about this whole episode and chased some of the conspiracy theories. And when I speak, it's interesting. I acknowledge this as something I got wrong. Believe me, I thump my chest and take credit for a lot of things I think I got right. But this is one of those that I think I got wrong for having entertained all those theories. Here's the question for Justice Stephen Taylor. Do you have any doubt that the circle of those responsible was limited to McVeigh, Nichols, and Fortier?
I have no doubt.
No doubt.
And I can say that not just on just my intuition. I can say that because I know all of the evidence in this case. I lived it. I had to decide. There were thousands of pieces of evidence. I had to decide what was admitted, what was not. I told the defense lawyers that if you have evidence, any evidence, that is admissible material and you following the rules of evidence, and you're a trial lawyer, following the rules of evidence, if it's admissible, I'm going to let it in. Bring me any evidence.
Wow.
Any evidence.
Mm-hmm.
If it's admissible, it'll be admitted. The prosecutors didn't like me saying that, but I wanted this to be a fair trial, and I didn't want any. They could not bring anything. They had an opportunity to bring any evidence that I could admit that had anybody other than McVeigh, Nichols, and then Fortier knew about it. There's no evidence. Zero. So all of these urban legends and all this.
Well, I think I understand something now. I told you before we started to do the interview that I recently read Simple Truths by the FBI agents who were responsible for this. Justice, I don't think I fully appreciated the identity of John Doe number 2 having been figured out. You know, 20 yards from where you and I are seated, there are those original. It's unbelievable to be here and to go see. There's the McVeigh John Doe number 1. There's John number 2. It's a guy who the following day rented a truck for his own move and was wearing a Carolina Panthers hat.
Exactly. And they identified him, talked to him. There's no, I mean, I'm just telling you, Michael, if there was any evidence that could be admitted of any other conspirator, I would have let it in. There's zero.
It's upsetting to me to know that Fortier was given a relative to the other 2 guys, light sentence, that he's in the witness protection program, that he's out there and among us. I mean, I get it. You know, you need somebody to be the glue to present this, but can you speak to that aspect?
Well, he was a critical witness for the prosecution. He testified in my court for a long time and was under vigorous cross-examination. He made a good witness for the prosecution. McVeigh and Nichols involved him and let him know what was going on, and that he knew their plans, and of course the crime was he didn't report it. It didn't do anything to stop it. He took no active part in any of it other than just watching and listening and knowing, which is a crime. I feel the same way. I feel, 11 years he served. I think it was 11 years that he served. The judge in me wants more justice than that, probably, but that is part of the system. And the United States Attorney's Office, they did what they had to do to get him lined up to testify. So
you've been very, very clear that you're comfortable that these were the guys and that's where it began and ended. Respecting that, are there nevertheless questions that are still in your mind that you'd like to know the answer to as to some aspect of what went on here?
No.
No, you see it
I know,
clearly.
I've got the story. I spent a whole year of my life learning the story. I know the story. I know the start. I know the end.
I want to take a break and then come back and chat more with Justice Stephen Taylor. Thank you so much for being here. It just brings so much to a conclusion to be able to sit across from you and hear your learned view of this national tragedy. So I'm very much appreciative. Computer